Hello, how's everybody doing? Hi, Dana. I think we've got everybody muted for now, but once we get started. So we're just kind of waiting on Jeremy to get on the call. I know he was in a meeting a little bit before this, so we might have a little bit of time to kill. Just sort of a quick update, we got the next, Nemus's bill coming around next session again, and it's looking good. They like their prospects. There's also another bill by Rachel Roberts that will be, I don't know if she's going to introduce it or if they're just still kind of working on it, but I think it's going to be a very comprehensive bill. Because of that, it probably will take a lot longer to really nail down the nuts and bolts of it. But until they really start pre-filing stuff, we don't know what we got to work with. On federal level, there's a few bills going on. There's the Safe Banking Act, which would be a really big boon to the industry, and there's also the MORE Act, which would essentially deschedule cannabis and would change it federally. Of course, it would still be up to the states to make their own laws and how they go about that. But that's always a good thing. And so there's some movement there. And to get active in those, like you can go to normal.org/act and sign on to those letters that you can send off to Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, and your congressional representative. All right, I just want to take the time again to just thank everybody for getting on the call and getting and going on our meeting. We are switching to the virtual meetings just to be more inclusive. We're all scattered out through all over the place, so this is probably the best way for us all to kind of get together and share information. And oh, here he is. All right, welcome, Jeremy. Give us 1 second. We'll get you. Thank you. Maximize the screen.
There we go.
Hey, Matt, I made it. Finally got it. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I was coming out of a Weed Maps meeting and I was a little disorganized there.
Oh, that's quite all right. Let's see if there we go. We can see you there.
There we go.
Excellent. All right. Well, good. I'm glad to have you here. Glad you could make time to meet with us.
Yeah.
Well, let's start out. Let's tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Who is Jeremy Jacobs? What's he do?
Oh gosh, what's the age rating on this meeting? I have to ask. Yeah, so born and bred Kentucky boy, which I think is very important for a meeting like this. I've been a cannabis advocate for my entire life. I remember my first experience, I'm sure we all do, with cannabis, and it was a good one. That's true most of the time. My entire life I've experienced work and all the stresses that come with that and used cannabis for relief. Later on in life, I started technology companies roughly 15 years ago and found myself at a very interesting place. I was actually working with a guy that worked for me, and I invented the digital menu in 2008, the first TV menu that you see inside of a restaurant. And a guy that was working for me that lived in Denver, Colorado, calls me one day and he says, "Hey, I've got these friends, Greg Gammon and Justin Jones. They're going to open this marijuana dispensary in Colorado." I was like, "What is a marijuana dispensary? That sounds exciting." And it was recreational marijuana was becoming legal. He says, "What do you think about, instead of me selling chicken sandwich menus to these restaurants, what if we made marijuana menus?" And I said, "Well, that sounds like probably the coolest thing I've ever heard of. Like, I can be in technology and in marijuana at the same time." And so roughly 8 years ago, hey, Grace. So roughly 8 years ago, I dove in and I was very excited and gotten involved in the industry very early on, kind of to quick here. And Matt, if you want to cut me off anytime, please do so. But very quickly in the industry, when I first got to Colorado, I remember flew in a few days before recreational legality started. And when we first got there, I noticed that there was no advertising for cannabis anywhere. But like as I'm driving down the road, those little mile marker signs about this big. It says this section of highway adopted by the Boy Scouts of America or something. And really what that means is they come clean the litter up from the section of road. I noticed all of the little road signs in Colorado were adopted by a marijuana company. And at first I'm like, are these people just that ecologically friendly? They just love to pick up trash. And after spending a few days in Colorado, I realized that no, they're not that ecologically friendly. They are ecologically friendly, so don't get me wrong, but they didn't have anywhere to advertise. And so as a company, we started to focus on how is it that marijuana companies can reach their consumer, whether it be in a dispensary through like the television network that we run in about 1,000 dispensaries, or on their mobile devices or desktop computers, connected TV. And then as time went on, we also noticed there was a huge amount of interest in, I don't know how much everybody here knows about legalized cannabis and the sales that actually go on in the other states where it's legal, but all these products are really small batches. So if you grow a pound of cannabis, it's got 28% of THC. The next pound of the same exact strain might have 27%, which is very different than say your Chick-fil-A and chicken sandwich is a chicken sandwich, right? It's not like they go, here's a 27 gram chicken sandwich, here's a 28 gram. So they don't do that. And so that created a huge challenge for dispensaries. And, you need to keep these products up to date, because I don't know how many of you on this phone, but I'm sure several of you, so raise your hand if you have gone into a dispensary or visited Colorado or California and you ordered online and somebody calls you back and says, hey, I don't have that. Sorry about that. What else do you want to buy? And so we focused on a lot of those problems. And so for years now, I've been involved in advocacy, but also very in-depthly involved in looking at the cannabis industry and taking all this technical knowledge that I've gained in other companies I own, called Iconic is one example. We service other industries with kiosk and web purchasing platforms and digital TV menus and things like that. And we've really applied it to the cannabis industry now for, roughly 8 years. And so that's what I focus my days on, is either, some sort of advocacy. Matt is constantly, getting me involved in whatever's going on and reminding me what's happening. And then the rest of my day, the other 75%, 80% of the day is involved in looking at, when you do legalize cannabis, what are the actual challenges that you face as a cannabis company, and how can technology, and in most cases it can, how can technology help to take those challenges and make them much smaller than they kind of appear on the surface?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned advertising, and you're in a lot of markets. So let's talk a little bit about like that, what kind of challenges that brings. Because I know, even though we don't have an industry here, we know that the advertising is pretty much cut off, or there's different rules and regulations. And sometimes I think I've read New Mexico, you have to like have all your advertisements or any kind of just print ads run past the government agency, just get them approved first. So let's talk about some of the things that the challenges in that you could get through.
Oh, that you probably picked the most challenging topic I've ever dealt with, other than raising children. So cannabis is not a federal thing, at least not yet. And even when it becomes a federal thing, I assure you it won't be a federal thing. They'll just get their federal tax dollars and leave the work of regulating it on the state level, like they do a lot of topics, and cannabis will fall in that category. And so when you look at, especially like what you're talking about with cannabis regulation as it relates to advertising, I'll give you a prime example of just how far the scale widens here. So on the left side of the scale, you got Pennsylvania, which says that if I'm going to run an advertisement in a dispensary or on a mobile phone to a particular, dispensary client, then I can't post anything except medically verified and scientific claims, which, by the way, is this tiny little basket, since cannabis has been illegal for like 100 years and we aren't even allowed to research it. And then I go to Alaska, and I'm not allowed to say anything has been scientifically proven at all and can make absolutely zero claims. And so that, that's the dichotomy of the situation. Now, those two are extreme. So they're the poles over here. And then there's this middle section here that exists. And in those kind of situations, the regulations are pretty normal, and they make a lot of sense. Like, for example, you can't show advertisements that have children or things that would appeal to children. So unfortunately, Matt, we know comic book characters. I know you're a big comic book fan over here. And so you can't use things like that that may induce children to consume cannabis. You in most states, believe it or not, you can't actually show a cannabis bud. I mean, we're selling cannabis, but we can't actually show what cannabis looks like for some reason or another. That's a thing. It's a real thing. And then in most states, you also can't show people consuming cannabis. So we're selling vape pens or edibles or whatever, but I can't show somebody putting them in their mouth for whatever reason that is. And so when you're dealing with these kind of regulations, what really happens is you sort of say, okay, these are states I just don't care about anymore because their regulations are just so tight that existing in that universe is a dangerous, toxic place to live at, and we don't want to go there. And then for all the other states that we operate in, the way we look at that is what are the tightest rules? You know, I was talking a second ago, like this is a spectrum, but most of them are here. So what are the tightest rules inside this little band here? And let's just stay inside that band and adhere to the rules of the tightest one in that band. And then you know that you've managed to stay inside of all the other more liberal ones in that particular category. But to your point, man, it's enormously challenging. Like, you know, if you're across in state boundaries, and there's a lot of you guys, as we legalize cannabis, there's probably a lot of people on this phone call that'll start brands, and then you'll have ambitions to take those brands and cross state borders with them and open up licenses in other states. Those are the kind of challenges you face. Now, if you're just inside a particular state, then it's pretty simple. You just stay in, you know, those state regulations, you learn them, you know them by heart, you know, and you stay inside of them. But when you're a company, whether it's a brand or a dispensary chain that's crossing state boundaries, or you're a technology company that's crossing state boundaries, it's a big challenge. We maintain a spreadsheet. It's like, I call it sheets on sheets on sheets, because it's just a spreadsheet of links that go to other spreadsheets that go to other spreadsheets. And these are all the insane, ridiculous regulations around cannabis that just probably shouldn't exist, sort of like prohibition shouldn't have existed.
Now, this is an interesting, you know, this is probably not an interesting question, but just out of curiosity, I'm not sure, and I'm sure a lot of our people are wondering, how many states and places are you in?
38 really strong. Canada, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, most all of it's continental United States, you know, but we do spread out a little bit. Outside of that, in Puerto Rico and Jamaica, they're called herb houses instead of dispensaries. In the Pacific Northwest and in Washington, they call them retail. They don't like the word dispensary for some reason. But we're in roughly 38 to 40 markets. The strength of what I do on a daily basis, though, you know, since we sell what's kind of considered a luxury item, all, you know, self-order kiosk and TV menus that be up on the wall and those kinds of things, you find most of the customers that I would obtain as a business are going to be more in the recreational markets, because the recreational dispensaries generate tremendously larger amounts of cash than medical markets. I know it sounds fascinating, but you know, if you look at California, the medical market's been legal since 1998, I think it was.
Yeah, and there's an anniversary coming up.
Yeah, been a long time. And so, but before it was recreation and medically legal is a pretty interesting term. I think in 2001, I went to a doctor because I heard you could get a California medical card even without residency. So I went to a doctor and gave him $50 and taught him about anxiety, and he wrote me a prescription for cannabis, and then pointed me at a door different than when I came in. He said, go through that door. And when I go through that door, I was in a marijuana dispensary like instantly. So, you know, so as easy as that was in a medical dispensary to obtain a medical license and buy medical marijuana, you still get to watch when a state goes recreational, the boom is 5, 10, 20x. And so for a company like mine, to go back to your question, Matt, if you're selling a product that's just absolutely, if you're selling electricity and water, you're getting all the customers. But when you're selling things like what we do, the recreational markets are definitely the more popular markets.
Certainly, and I think, you know, when the states go rec, you see the amount of revenue that's generated is just massive.
Oh, yeah.
The tax dollars that they get to keep and get to reinvest, like, you know, that's something that when it finally comes here, you know, that we'll get a good boost of the economy. You know, we'll need it, because you look around and we see how things are.
To
Having
that point,
a new industry boom would be big.
to that point, you look at Colorado, if you want to see a primary case study, because they've released more data than really anyone. And the places they dedicated the marijuana revenue to were places we all care about, like, police departments, fire departments, and schools, primarily education. And if you look at Colorado as a medical market, like, it was so insignificant that it just wasn't even mentioned. Nobody brought it up. Like, the fact that Colorado has been medically legal for like a gazillion years, you probably didn't even know that because nobody talked about it, and there's no revenue to generate there. And I know Kentucky, we're trying the best we can to become a medical market, but from a revenue taxation standpoint, Colorado doesn't even have egregious taxes. California has egregious taxes, like a third or a fourth of what you spend at a dispensary is going to the government. In Colorado, it's much less than that. But still, yet, when Colorado decided to go recreationally legal, all of the problems in the schools were solved. We got Kentucky teachers out here bankrupting themselves to buy folders and pencils for kids. And in Colorado, they're just demoing all the old schools and building brand new schools. I mean, this is what's happening, and it's insane. And so there's it's a two-step process, obviously, for most states. There's been a few states that just skip medical altogether. And I saw somebody said Illinois is egregious. I agree. I bought some weed there the other day. It's totally egregious. What was on the label versus what I had to pay was totally different things. Like, hold on, I need to call my banker and see if I can get a loan for these taxes. But medical's a step, but when you look at economic impact, especially in Kentucky, we need the revenue. And so eventually becoming recreational legal is the answer to that question. I mean, I think everybody on this call can agree. There's hundreds of thousands of people in Kentucky that just need medical cannabis because they suffer from something that there's not another answer to. And so that's a primary objective, especially for a group like this. But secondary to that is there's a lot of needs that have nothing to do with cannabis that can be funded by cannabis, and those needs get filled through recreational cannabis. So when people start to trade their alcohol usage and consumption for cannabis, which is precisely what happens in the states where you go recreational legal, people stop buying booze and they start buying cannabis, which might be, just to clue in on that might be the problem of why it's not legal in the state of Kentucky. And I think I pointed that out in the article in MG Retail Magazine. There might be
that's interesting. That brings me to our final question here. Yeah. What do you see as the biggest obstacles for reform, and how do we get past it?
Do you want me to list them by name, the bourbon companies or the bought off?
No. But in general, what that's going to be a question we're going to ask everybody that comes on. What do you see as because everybody's going to have a different answer to that, I think. So, what do you see as the biggest obstacle?
I'm not sure they will, man. I'm not sure. I don't know if y'all have walked in the offices of the politicians that don't want legalized cannabis, but generally behind their desk, there's a wall. Everybody has a bookshelf in their office, so they look legit with books that they supposedly read. Well, these guys just have walls of bourbon bottles behind them. And if you look at the stats of what happens to alcohol consumption in a place where cannabis is legal, there's a detriment there. Now, what I think the bourbon companies should really do is realize that Maker's Mark, for example, which is now owned like by the Japanese or something, Bill Samuels Jr. sold it off to somebody foreign, but they're making the vast majority of their revenue outside of Kentucky. So, I don't understand at this point. I'm having a lack of understanding of what we're doing in Kentucky has absolutely anything to do with their empires. But I do believe that the bourbon industry and its ties, or even the pharmaceutical industry from that standpoint, that has a lot to lose. People getting off of hydrocodones and oxycontins and arthritis medications. And I could go on forever with this. You all know the list. And if you don't, I'm sure I can get it to you. But that's a vast majority of the issue is that. I think another issue, and this speaks to Kentucky NORML as a, this speaks to Kentucky NORML in regards to the work you guys do, is it's just rallying the advocates together with this, like a single focus. If you look at states that have legalized cannabis, they rallied behind a specific group and everybody become united. And if you look at Kentucky, there's just a lot of sparse groups scattered out, and they all have very mixed messages. And so the legislators are getting very mixed messages of what legalized cannabis looks like. And, that's a bigger challenge than it sounds like on the surface, because you got to get a lot of people to agree on things. They don't always agree, but that's another challenge. How do we unite everybody that's in this fight together?
No, I mean, good points all around. And Jeremy, I want to thank you again for coming on. We won't keep you very long. Does anybody have any questions for him before he goes? Feel free to put them in the chat there, or unmute yourself and ask away.
Grace said she wants all the names. Are you forming a hit list, Grace? What are you doing?
Well, Grace is over here talking about felonies.
Mark, yes, can confirm.
You should delete the comment quickly before the CIA. But yeah, guys, just so y'all know, I'm available all the time. I live here in Kentucky. I live in Bowling Green. We've got an office in Western Kentucky University's High-Tech Research and Development Center, which is completely ironic that we run a marijuana company out of a WKU-funded research center, but it's true. Just anything that I can do for you guys. I know before Matt was the executive chair of Kentucky NORML, he actually got me wrapped up in it when he reopened the chapter years ago, and I was it, and I was probably a bad chair for a while, and he's very much more active than I was, so for that I apologize. But I'm here to answer any questions you guys have ever. You know how to reach me. I'm open on Facebook. It says, how do you think we can inspire more people to speak up in favor? The biggest thing, Grace, that I see, even the hardest of hearts against cannabis really change their tune when someone that they know or love or care about is impacted by something that cannabis can resolve. So if all of a sudden your mother, and I'm not suggesting you'll give everybody's mother's cancer or anything, but when someone that they care about ends up with cancer or something that medical cannabis can have an impact on, that is what changes the hearts and the minds of the really hardest of hard people that I know. And so, what I would suggest is looking into those people and trying to find a relationship that's someone they care about or someone that they know cares about, and demonstrating to them like the positive impact of cannabis. I think there's a lot of stress and focus on economic recovery for the state of Kentucky, considering its terrible deficits and things of that nature. And there's all these reasons you can focus on cannabis, but nobody's heart gets pulled by money. Nobody's heart gets pulled by those sorts of things. What pulls your heart is when you find out someone that you care about has got some terminal illness, or someone that has someone, and you help bring that individual forward. And I know you guys probably saw us at rallies a long time ago. And a friend of mine, Nick Risden, which actually I call him a cannabis refugee. He's now left the state of Kentucky and moved to Michigan because cannabis is the only thing really solving him. He brought in a tackle box full of drugs. I mean, it had like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bottles in it. I've got a photograph of it. It's just like, this can't possibly be what he has to consume every day. And it was like, and if you laid it in a bowl, I actually had him take one of every pill and put it in a bowl. Like, it's a meal. Just the pills he has to eat's a meal. And that's no longer a thing. Now he's on like 3 or 4 prescriptions instead of 300 or 400 or whatever the number was. And so being able to demonstrate that, Grace, I think is how you get more people to speak in favor, and just how you take the hardest of hearts to change the way they look at things, because they've just been told by, terrible propaganda for years, reefer madness. There was a video that showed black men raping white women because they consume cannabis that was produced. I mean, it's terribly unclassy in so many ways. I don't even know how to even unpack that. And so that's the mentality that a lot of these people were raised on. That's what they were taught by, was this sort of propaganda. And so getting away from that and showing them, hey, here's an actual use case in which cannabis saves somebody's life, or if it didn't save their life, changed their life. They went from being incapacitated, debilitated, just not functioning in life and not a productive citizen, to becoming a productive citizen. I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do is if you had a wall of case studies of here's all the people in Kentucky that cannabis has helped. I mean, what if we actually knew that number? What if we actually had a picture of all those people and a little, here's what cannabis did for me. I mean, how many is that? Here, I'm one right here. You know, I don't have the anxiety I used to have. I'm no longer on Valiums or Xanax or anything like that, walking around like a zombie. And so, you know, the question is, who are these people and what's that about? And I, you know, I think one way that could potentially is if people could anonymously tune in and say, hey, here was my life before and here's what it is with cannabis. But even then, to answer that question fully, Grace, there's to be somebody go, oh, you just made all that up, because there's always that guy, right? There's just not enough truth for that guy. Jason said, do we think medical cannabis is the next step for Kentucky, or do we think rec is possible with this legislative session?
You know, for that, honestly, it's going to be a medical. That's I'd like to see them work decrim in conjunction with that. But you know, our rec is ways off, unfortunately.
Yeah, with this group of legislators, I'd agree. You know,
certainly, and the way we can change that is just vote for new folks.
Yeah, that's the biggest way. Like Grace was asking, how do we turn people around? Well, just vote them out. You know,
vote them out. Although that's such a hard thing to do, that's really what it comes down to. You look at all the progress Virginia had in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. They've passed like 70 bills relating to cannabis. It's because they voted people out and they put people in to do it, you know. And I mean, when it gets down to it, that's what we might end up having to do to get to rec anyway. But medical, I think we have a path. And I'd like to see us get there. I'd like to see a little different than what they have laid out, but that's neither here nor there.
Well,
any progress is good progress.
Starts to start, you know. And
yeah,
and politics is about bargaining and compromising is what it boils down to. And so anything's better than what we currently have. And because currently what's happening is, you know, I'd argue most of the people in this chat right now are probably buying weed from their neighbor that was grown in a closet, or they're driving across the road into Illinois or Ohio. God forbid you go to Ohio. Let's not even get into those regulations.
So many bad things about Ohio.
Yeah, or drive to Michigan. I'd rather go to Michigan than I would Illinois or Ohio. But the reality is that's what's happening. And so, you know, just the beginning of that not happening. So that's even a place where you look at the police and you say, how do you get them involved? Well, it's either the people are driving out of your state or they're staying in your state. And there's something to that, you know, and they want people driving over to Belterra and getting drunk, if you will, gambling all night and driving back across the bridge into Louisville. Not that people hire a danger by any stretch of the imagination, other than, you know, sucking up Call of Duty minutes on Xbox Live and eating Doritos. But, you know, outside of that just even law enforcement can get behind this. I've had law enforcement officers that I'm friends with, and they said it's a ticketable offense in Kentucky, and I've never written one, nor do I know anybody else that has, and we just don't care. So when your law enforcement's backing it and your medical community is beginning to back it, and there's still doctors that are holdouts, but a lot of doctors are starting to turn around and say, okay, yeah, there's something to this. That just applying a lot of pressure to those politicians, especially from people with advanced degrees or that hold community service positions. Like, they care more about those people than they ever do all of us just general tax-paying citizens that go work our 9-to-5 jobs. They care more about those public servants. They care about more about those medical workers and what their opinions are, because that has a double duty there. Those are the people that are serving their constituents. And so getting those people to speak up is a big deal.
Oh, definitely. And, you know, the more voices we have, the more powerful the message is.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to be as loud as I can. I mean, I made a couple of pretty interesting statements that's been published. So they left out the names, by the way. I actually mentioned them by name. And the writer on that article called me and he says, I left those out because I figured you'd probably want me to. I said, oh, hell no. I wanted you to publish.
I don't care. One more question, actually. This is kind of fun. Tell us about, like, how much fun is the Cannabis to drive around and go places? Like, that's got to be a trip.
Yeah, so I was.
Tell us about it for people who don't know. You know, tell them about the Cannabis.
Yeah,
and
so I'm gonna try to grab this window here, and I'm gonna if you don't mind, I'll share a screen.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah. So am I sharing or what am I doing? Can you see my screen?
Mm,
Oh, it
uh,
says you've disabled me. I'm disabled by you, Matt.
oh,
So the cannabis, while Matt's pulling that up, and I'm pulling up YouTube here to get you guys a video. So the cannabis is a very interesting thing of mine. So I sat around in the cannabis industry for years, and I kept hearing everybody say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna open up a medical marijuana dispensary on wheels. We want to, open a dispensary that could drive around." And I kept hearing people say this, and so eventually I just kind of got tired of it, and hearing people talk about how this is what they're gonna do, and I thought to myself, well, why don't we just kind of go do it? And so, did you fix that, Matt?
no, I don't know how to do this. I'm trying to do another thing.
No, I
He was
got
going to share his screen, and I don't know how to allow him.
you. Yeah. So
I think our technical.
well, I'll share a link if I can in the comments here, and then everybody can go look at it on their own.
Okay.
This is a little visual tour. I shared a link there, and I'll share another one real quick of another video. So the first link I shared, just for everybody, is the actual journey of developing the cannabis. And you get to watch us actually take a 43-foot long Class A motorhome and then disable that and gut the inside of it and build a marijuana dispensary on the inside. And the point of that was to be able to showcase all of our retail technology products, and then also create an environment. So if we're at like a show or something, and there's a party, that you could use this bus for partying. So the bus gets used in a lot of ways. The first way is it goes to shows. I don't know how many of you have ever worked for somebody who had to set up a booth at an expo, but it's the biggest pain in the fucking ass you'll ever deal with in your life. You got to ship all this shit, and when it gets there, some mafia controlled organization, usually called Freeman, they charge you like $9,000 a pound to bring it to your booth. And then they want all these union workers to build things for $40 an hour. And it's a bust. So it's easier when you just roll up in here with this RV and put the slides out and turn the generator on, and boom, you're done. And so that's one use of it. Another use, we brought it to Frankfurt a couple of times. I think a lot of you have seen it. A third use is like if we go to cannabis related parties, since technically it's Jeremy Jacobs's motorhome, it's my private residence. And so as long as weed is legal in that state and cannabis is legal, you're free to consume on the inside of it, and the cops can just kind of piss off. And there's nothing they can do about that. So we take advantage of said legal loophole on a regular basis, which, by the way, the cops don't ever mind. They think it's cool that we've made a bus that, that's all contained in, so it's not spilling in the streets. So they're big supporters. They think it's a great idea. And then also other brands rent the RV, and we will completely rewrap it, the beverage company, like they make little cans of cannabis sodas, 2 milligrams of THC, 4 milligrams of CBD per can, and great flavors too, natural. It's made from all natural ingredients, like just water and mint and lemon juice and things like that, and very refreshing. So they'll rent the whole thing, and we'll change all the signage in it. But the question was, how fun is it? Like, listen, when you pull up to a place and you have a purple 43-foot motorhome, and you're burn honking the big foghorn, you pull these slides out, and this big porch spills out of it, and there's this $20,000 stereo system inside pumping the new Jack Harlow hits, and bumping the bass, and there's a lounge in the back where I've like interviewed Tommy Chong and Jim Belushi and just all sorts of famous people, Mike Tyson, and it's all happening, and there's all these screens, and it's just you're the life of the party, man. I mean, it's a cool thing. Now, I know when we go to Frankfurt, it's a little more tame. So for y'all seen it in Frankfurt, don't think that's the way the real cannabis rolls. That's its tame little cousin. But when you go to an actual cannabis party, it's the coolest thing there. Like undeniably, it's a lot of fun. We've actually had several hosts of parties. I can remember one party like 2 years ago, pre-COVID. We were at this guy's party, and he had these ice sculptures. There was like 15 ice sculptures, like 15 feet tall. I don't even know what that cost. I don't want to know. And he had these girls on these ropes that would spin down and spin back up and twist and twirl. And all this kind of stuff. And, you know, we're about 2.5 hours into a 4-hour party. And the next thing I know, I look over and Dan is walking in the Cannabis, which is parked on some side street next to the party. It's the consumption lounge. And now the host of the party isn't even at his party anymore. He's on the bus. And so it's the best fun you can ever have and get away with it. It's all I can tell you.
Well, I just want to thank you again for coming on. Doesn't look like we've got any more questions coming through. Stay tuned. We'll send out an email coming up. Our next meeting will be on November 18th. Because of Thanksgiving, we're moving it up a week, just so you know we're not encroaching on anybody's family time and all that good stuff. So we'll send out an email for that, and we're going to have someone on who's one of the major sponsors for HB 136 to come on and talk about the bill. And so excited to kind of get into that a little bit with them and see what they've got to say about the bill coming out and all that good stuff. So I want to thank everybody for coming out and participating in the Zoom. And once again, I want to thank Jeremy Jacobs, CEO and President of Enlighten, for coming on and talking with us.
Thank you, Matt, for doing this. I think that as time goes on, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we really appreciate I think everybody here, I speak for everybody really appreciates what you do for everybody.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. It's hard work, but it's much better when there's so many people that want to help and be involved, ain't it?
Awesome.
All right. Well, good night, everyone. Have a good evening.
See you guys.